In the history of Kansas City sports, there are some names that stand head and shoulders above the rest. Baseball Hall of Famer George Brett, Super Bowl winning quarterback Len Dawson, and golf great Tom Watson. But fans in Kansas City will tell you that few sports figures are as beloved in this town as Buck O'Neil. And it's really more for who he was as a person, rather than his athletic accomplishments. But Buck was a great athlete. He played in the Negro Leagues from 1937 to 1955.
Buck O'Neil was a great player in the Negro Leagues. You know, joining the Memphis Red Sox in 1937, coming to Kansas City in 1938, and of course he had an affiliation with this great city all the way until the day he died. Great first baseman, 288 lifetime hitter, great defensive first baseman. Buck could absolutely pick it.
Buck never got to play in Major League Baseball because of the league's color barrier. He would break into the majors in a different way later, though. He joined the Chicago Cubs as a scout, and he would eventually become the first African-American coach in Major League history. But Buck never forgot the Negro Leagues and all the players like him who never got to play Major League Baseball. In 1990, he helped establish the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. The museum's president, Bob Kendrick, says this museum honors a league that, despite the fact it was full of players kept out of the majors, was proud of its style and its history.
That's what makes the story of the Negro League so special. It emerges out of the ashes of American segregation, a horrible chapter in this country's history. But out of segregation rose this wonderful story of triumph and conquest. And really it's all based on one very small, simple principle. You won't let me play with you in the major leagues, then I'll just create a league of my own, the Negro Leagues. That league, the Negro Leagues, would go on to rise to rival, and in many cities across this great country of ours, surpass Major League Baseball in popularity and in attendance. And so when we think about that, it embodies the American spirit unlike, I think, any story in the annals of American history. So even though it was America that was trying to prevent these great athletes from sharing in the joys of her so-called national pastime, it was the American spirit that allowed them to persevere and prevail, and they created this great league, a thriving business enterprise known as the Negro Leagues. It was exciting, it was fast, quick, aggressive, daring. Fans are dressed in full regalia. They're looking good. Everybody's looking good going to those games, because oftentimes we were leaving church, going straight to the ballpark, so everybody was looking good. But you were going to see a style of play that was really polar opposite from Major League Baseball at that time.
Fans who walk through the museum can get an idea of what the league was like and look deeper into the careers of some all-time greats.
Cool Papa Bell, Hall of Famer, still believed to be the fastest man in the world, clocked him circling the bases in 12 seconds. Satchel said he was so fast he could walk in the room, turn off the lights, get in bed, pull up the covers before the room went dark. And then, of course, there's the great Josh Gibson, who many would call the Black Babe Ruth. But there are others who saw Gibson play who would call Ruth the White Josh Gibson. What about Oscar Charleston, whom Buck O'Neil would say, till the day he died, the greatest all-around baseball player he'd ever seen? He thought Willie Mays was the greatest all-around major leaguer, and most concur. But he thought Oscar Charleston was the greatest baseball player he had ever seen.
Buck O'Neil insisted that what he helped establish be called the Negro League Baseball Museum, not the Negro League Baseball Hall of Fame. He believed that any player who was a Hall of Famer should be in Cooperstown. He served for 20 years on the Hall of Fame's Veteran Committee, and he spent much of that time making sure the best players in Negro League history were in the Hall. In 2006, there was a special ballot for Negro Leaguers, and 17 figures from that era were inducted. Buck himself, however, fell one vote short of induction. Instead of being bitter, he handled it the way he handled everything, with class and a smile.
What I remember about that occasion was the way that he handled the disappointment of not getting in. He never said a disparaging word about anyone who had anything to do with that decision. He stood up, he took it like a man. Matter of fact, he implored and encouraged all of us not to be bitter about the decision. And then he did something that I just found to be almost incredible in itself. He would go to Cooperstown, speak on behalf of 17 others who were all dead, who didn't have a voice, and deliver this impassioned speech on their behalf. When the world was saying it should have been your induction ceremony speech, Buck O'Neil stood there and represented those who couldn't represent themselves in what I still believe to be one of the most selfless acts in professional sports history.
Buck passed away later that year at the age of 94, but his legacy lives on in Kansas City, not only at the museum, but also at Kauffman Stadium, the home of the Kansas City Royals. The team now honors a special person in the community at every home game by allowing him or her to sit in the Buck O'Neil legacy seat.
The idea that Dan Glass and those involved with the Kansas City Royals organization came up to remember Buck by creating the Buck O'Neil legacy seat was absolutely brilliant. You know, it was the best way to remember Buck. And so when Buck passed away, he had his designated seat there at the Royals where he sat for years. You know, he was still labeled a scout, even though those days he really wasn't scouting as much, although he'd sit there and chart pitches, but it was more PR, signing autographs, hugging, taking pictures. And so when he passed away, everybody's wondering, what are they going to do with Buck's seat? Some people were saying memorialize it. Other people were saying take it and bring it to the Negro Leagues Museum. Well, Dan Glass had the idea of a nomination process that would recognize ordinary people who did extraordinary things. And that became the Buck O'Neil Legacy Seat program. The club has been doing this since 2007, and no one has missed sitting in Buck's seat.
Buck O'Neil spent his life fighting for equality and recognition for players who didn't get a chance to play a game they loved. Not only did he succeed, but in the process, he became a legend himself.